By 1939, every British county regiment had a number of battalions of Territorial Army soldiers. Predecessor of today's Army Reserve, Territorial soldiers trained in their spare time, usually 1 or 2 nights a week, and would be released from work to attend a 2-week-long summer training camp. Their old nickname was the Saturday Night Soldiers, because they were seen by some as part-timers. But when war was declared, the TA was mobilised and the officers and men became full-time soldiers. After the outbreak of war in 1939, many TA units were deployed to coastal defences all around Great Britain. Among them was the 18th Division, which drew the majority of its men from the Territorial Army Corps units and battalions of East Anglian regiments, specifically the Royal Norfolk Regiment, Suffolk Regiment, Cambridgeshires and the Bedfordshire and Hertfordshires. It also included battalions from around the country, such as Royal Northumberland Fusiliers, Sherwood Foresters and the 137 Field Regiment Royal Artillery, known as the Blackpool Regiment, because it was raised from men in and around the popular seaside resort. During the winter of 1939-40, it was so cold the sea froze. So it's somewhat ironic that having weathered that bitterly cold winter on the coast, when the 18th Division were deployed abroad, it was not to the war they were expecting to fight in Europe, nor even to North Africa, but to the sweltering heat of the Far East. The 18th Division was to be the main British reinforcement for the garrison at Singapore, which would also receive troops from both the Australian and Indian armies. By the time the 18th Division troops arrived in December 1941, Japanese forces had already invaded Malaya and were making headway towards Singapore Island. A myth has arisen that the 18th Division marched down their gangplanks of their ships straight into captivity, but this was far from the case. Units were rapidly deployed to Johore and fought hard against a relentless enemy. The last of the Allied forces withdrew from Malaya on the 31st of January 1942, and the causeway between Johore and Singapore was blown up by the Royal Engineers, buying British and Commonwealth units on Singapore valuable time to regroup and prepare their defences. But they didn't have long. The first wave of Japanese troops landed on the 8th of February 1942. There was fierce fighting, but sheer weight of numbers saw the Japanese gain a toehold, and they were soon pushing inland. The fighting was intense, and often hand to hand. On the 12th of February, the men of the 18th Division were ordered to withdraw from their forward positions and to take over the perimeter defences of Singapore City. On the morning of the 15th of February, Allied troops were running out of ammunition. Water was becoming scarce, and Japanese forces were penetrating the last defensive lines. The General Officer commanding, Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, met with the Japanese commanders. The pressure from Japanese forces was enormous, although in reality their troops were also being stretched to the limit. Percival opted to surrender, and it was agreed all hostilities were to cease at 8:30 p.m. that night. When the news of the surrender arrived at the battle lines, the men were devastated. Many of those who were there swore to their dying day that they could have fought on, but nothing more could be done, and the remaining Allied troops, estimated to be as many as 80,000, would spend the rest of the war as prisoners of war in Japanese hands.